Hello, and welcome to this overview of the CIMA F2 Advanced Financial Reporting paper. My name is Mike Weaver. I work for Kaplan Financial, and I specialize in teaching financial accounting and reporting papers, and also teach the management level CIMA case study paper. So what I'm going to do now is to explain how the CIMA F2 paper sits and fits within the overall CIMA qualification, and then we're going to look in a little bit more detail at the CIMA F2 exam itself, the number of questions you get, the different question types, and perhaps what we'll then do is go on and look at the different areas of the syllabus and their relative importance in the context of this exam overall. The CIMA qualification consists of certificate level, which I am not showing on the screen at the moment. But once you have progressed past the certificate level, you will then encounter the operational, management, and strategic levels. The CIMA qualification has three pillars: the enterprise pillar, which consists of the E1, E2, and E3 papers; the performance pillar, which is perhaps more of what you would understand as traditional management accounting, but the performance pillar consists of P1, P2, and P3. And we then have the financial pillar, the pillar that contains the CIMA F2 paper, which is where we're going to focus most of our attention. So F1, F2, and F3 sit within that financial pillar. Those pillars cut across three levels: operational, management, and strategic. Sticking with the management level, E2, P2, and F2. So you can see that the F2, the Advanced Financial Reporting paper, sits within this management level. Now, once you have passed the E2, P2, and F2 papers, you will then sit a 3-hour management case study exam. This exam will test you on aspects of E2, P2, and F2. It's very much an integrated exam involving a lot of application of knowledge from those individual E2, P2, and F2 disciplines. I'm not going to say any more about that as part of this session because I want to focus on the F2 Advanced Financial Reporting paper. So what about the F2 paper then? Well, like all of those E's and P's and F's, it is a computer-based exam consisting of 60 objective test questions, which have to be attempted across a 90-minute time frame. So a very time-pressured exam consisting of 60 questions, not all of which are going to be computational. There will be many questions that are discursive or narrative-based. Now, each question is equally weighted. So even though there will be a great range of difficulty, no question is worth any more than any other. Okay, so it's very important in the exam that if we do find that we get stuck on a question and it's really using up that time, then we need to flag that question and carry on and come back to it later on, perhaps. So this style of exam is very much an all or nothing. So you either get the question right or you don't get it right. Now, in terms of question styles, we have the select 1 from 4 or 2 from 5 type question styles. And we also have questions that ask you to input a figure into a box. So for example, you're asked to compute or calculate a particular figure, and you then have to type that figure into a box, which you'll see on the screen. CIMA will, of course, guide you as to whether you need to report that figure to 1 or 2 decimal places or to the nearest 1,000. Okay. We've also got drag and drop questions. So for example, if you're asked to account for something and work out which accounts need to be debited and credited, and also by how much, then you can drag the names of the various accounts that need to be debited and credited, and also the numbers, and drag them into the appropriate box, and then submit your answer. So the real variety. When we think multiple choice, that's very old school, isn't it? So is it A, B, C, or D? Hopefully you can see that this is an objective test exam rather than a strict multiple choice. Yeah, real variety of question styles. We also have, not many of them in this particular paper, but students tell me they don't really like the select all that apply questions, where we don't know whether 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the options apply. So those can be tricky, but they shouldn't feature too heavily in terms of your 60 questions overall. So a real mixed set of questions, but of course it's marked by a computer, so we need to be accurate. Now, the CIMA F2 syllabus is broken down into a number of content areas. Let's just take, first of all, then financing capital projects. So 15%. So that will be 9 questions. Yeah, 9 questions out of your 60. And that will cover sources of long-term finance and also calculating cost of equity, cost of debt, and WACC. So sources of long-term finance, this part of the syllabus will focus on the different sources of long-term finance open to businesses, debt finance, for example, borrowing money from a bank or issuing bonds. Also equity finance, of course, so issuing equity shares and so on. The questions that cover this sort of area may be narrative in nature as well. So looking at the advantages and disadvantages of different sources of finance, for example. And of course, the computational side lends itself much better to the calculation of cost of equity, cost of debt, and also weighted average cost of capital. Now, you do get a formula sheet in this exam, and that formula sheet will contain a number of formulas which you will not have to remember and commit to memory. They'll be available for you to access during the exam. So that formula sheet will help with a number of the questions that you may see in this area. As somebody that specializes in teaching more traditional financial reporting content, this financing of capital projects, to me, is a little bit more almost management accounting in terms of the the amount of mathematical computational stuff that we could get asked to do. We then have the perhaps more traditional areas, starting with financial reporting standards. 25%, so a quarter of your 60 questions, so 15 questions, will be based on a variety of international financial reporting standards. So, for example, you will encounter International Financial Reporting Standards number 15 and 16, which cover revenue and leases respectively. There are other accounting standards, and the key there is to apply your knowledge of these accounting standards and the rules contained within them to a variety of tasks relating to single entities, but also groups as well. And that leads us nicely into the group accounts part of the syllabus, which again is another 25%. So 15 questions focused on the preparation of group financial statements, whether that's group profit and loss, group statement of financial position, or group statement of changes in equity. And there are also some additional aspects of group accounts relating to disclosures. For example, related party transactions, transactions between parent companies and subsidiaries, for example. We then have the integrated reporting section. So 10% of the marks will be for integrated reporting questions. That's going to be about 6 questions. Over the last few years and beyond, perhaps even further back, there's definitely been a lot of discussion about expanding and extending reporting beyond more traditional financial reporting, which, as we understand, of course, contains profit and loss, cash flow, and statement of financial reporting. What you'll learn here is something about an organization called the International Integrated Reporting Council and the 6 capitals of integrated reporting. So I'm going to leave that with you as a little bit of intrigue there. So 6 questions on integrated reporting, none of which will be computational, purely discursive or narrative. And then that brings us on to analyzing financial statements, 25%. So again, a quarter of the exam, 15 questions across a range of different areas. Number 1 is the ability to calculate ratios. Yeah, so performance ratios, profitability ratios like gross profit margin, operating margin, and also, for example, liquidity ratios, things like the current and quick ratio, receivable days, payable days, and so on, things that you may have come across in other papers on this CIMA qualification. In the F2 paper, this section also requires a real deep knowledge of ratios, not just in terms of the calculation of the ratios, but in terms of interpreting those ratios. So there are many, many questions where the calculations and ratios are given to you in the question, and you will get a question asking you to interpret what those ratios might be meaning for the business. In addition to interpreting specific financial statement ratios, we also need to have an awareness of financial statements as a whole and what the figures contained within those financial statements might be telling us. And finally, understanding something about the limitations of perhaps historic and traditional financial statement analysis is something that CIMA would like you to know stuff about. So that concludes this sort of mini overview of the CIMA F2 paper. I hope you find that useful, and I wish you the best of luck, on behalf of Kaplan in your CIMA F2 studies. Practice doesn't need to make perfect, but in the exam, you will be looking to achieve a score of 100 out of 150. CIMA normally produce a scaled score of somewhere between 0 and 150, and you're looking to score 100 out of that 150 to secure a pass. Thank you.